The African American Legend series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as politics, sports, aviation, business, literature, religion, and music. We will explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they'd been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Bobbi Humphrey, the famous jazz flautist, a good friend, someone who really knows about jazz in America. So, Bobbi, welcome to African American Legends.
Thanks so much for having me, Roscoe.
Yeah, we'll have you back again.
Exactly.
You really tell the story. What's Bobbi Humphrey up to now?
Right now, since maybe about 5 or 6 months ago, I've been working on my website, being involved with the whole technology, how technology has changed the whole face of business, as well as been a very integral part of the arts and taking it to another level between consumer and artists, sharing information. My website is called BobbiHumphrey.net. And I write slogans as well. So I came up with the line, I said, been there yet, BobbiHumphrey.net. So I'm having a lot of fun with it. I keep the freshness, the giddiness almost, you know, when you're learning something, almost like a childlike wonder. Every morning I turn on my computer, Roscoe, and I go, even before I check my store, I check where people will have come for the guest book to see if I got any entries. And sometimes,
what kind of things do you get on the guest book?
Oh my goodness! Say yesterday I got entry from someone who had written, said, I'm from the Philippines, and they're still playing your songs years from now, different songs, and when are you coming to the Philippines? I've gotten entries from Africa, and then someone said, I'm from your most remote fan from Australia. So what it has done, it's the positive side of globalization and using technology as a tool. It's really, really, in my opinion, even the playing field of small, and I mean in a positive sense, meaning commercially we're of growth, but independent companies that we have almost, in a sense, well, not even in a sense, we've eliminated the quote-unquote middleman, and in certain instances, there's a positive use of middle quote-unquote men or women, but in this instance, there is a conversation and a commercialization between the fan and the musician, saying, okay, you like my music? Talk to me.
Well, let me ask you, do you actually have your music on the site, or do you use the site so that people can access the music by ordering it?
I actually have the music on the site as well. I have, for instance, the album Passion Flute. We took the samples, uploaded it so they can hear what they're listening to and decide if they want to buy, and then they go to my store. It's called, I came up with a name, the Bob Store, and that's an acronym for the best of Bobbi. And they listen to it, and they can purchase the album either old-fashioned way, check a money order, or they push a button that says PayPal, and it takes them right to the shopping cart, and it's a secure way of shopping with your credit card.
What about the music publishers and the licensing and so on? How is that affected by selling music?
It's the same
online?
thing as if you were selling it in a store. There are certain things that you have to do, like most of my music on this particular album, I wrote most of it, or I have the rights to it. But if anyone is using someone else's music, they have to get the same kind of clearances if in fact it's being sold in a brick and mortar store.
But one of the problems with downloading music, people can download it and you might not know they've downloaded it.
Well, you know what? That is going to be the next step that I'm going to pursue. And I've been quite hesitant because I like to research stuff and make sure that I understand. And it's been explained to me at least 99 times. So maybe when I get to 100, I'll go there, because my distributor online has been telling me, oh, you're losing so much money because at this time the songs that I own, I've elected not to sell download. In other words, if someone comes to my site, they can listen for about maybe 30 seconds. If they want to buy it, then it's shipped the old-fashioned way. There's an actual disc. But the way that technology is moving and has already moved, it's a direct point of purchase from the, as you're speaking, the downloading to the MP3 players, you know, such as the iPods and everything. So that is another income stream. But I have to, you know, I guess in that sense, I'm still a little bit old school and have elected to just sell the CD, the physical CD right now. Now, maybe next week you might turn on and you can actually get it on, say, like iTunes or Real Rhapsody, but right now I'm selling it only on my site.
Well, you've gone a long way in your music odyssey, starting as a youngster from Texas.
That's right.
Texas Southern.
The great state of Texas.
And here in New York, and you played with practically every major jazz organization, jazz artist in the field. What's been the most influential thing in development of your career?
You mean in terms of artists?
Artists or situations, because sometimes there's a particular situation that allows you to get the projection.
I would say two things that were very, very pivotal. The third day that I was in New York, I was actually on the stage with the great Duke Ellington. And that said to me that I had...
How did that happen?
Well, a cousin of mine, he plays trumpet. Matter of fact, he just turned 80 years old, Eddie Preston. He was playing with him when I was a little kid in Dallas, and I'd see his picture up on the piano at my Aunt Marie's, who was his grandmother. And she said, "You have a cousin up there." So when I came to New York, my father wanted me to go, but my mom, she said, "I don't want you to go, that's such a big place." And I came and I found my cousin Eddie, and he said, "Well, if you want to go with me, you can ride with me on the bus and meet Duke Ellington." It was like a dream. And he was sitting in his dressing room, and he says, "Yes, your cousin tells me you play that, do you?" And I was very, very nervous. And I said, I hesitated, and he said, "Well, either you do or you don't." And he says, "Okay, I'll see you on the bandstand." And we played some of the songs that I had been playing at Texas Southern University and SMU, Take the A Train, Sea Jam Blues. And another highlight was during that same time I was at the Apollo Theater, and I had the great luck or blessing of meeting the great Stevie Wonder. And we consequently became very, very close friends, and he played on a couple of my records, and I played on his, in my opinion, the seminal record of his career, Songs in the Key of Life. Right. And those were great, great highlights, and certainly playing at the Montreux Jazz Festival. And just 2 years ago, one of my dreams was realized. I got a chance to go to Tokyo, Japan. And I find that people in Japan so friendly. They have a great love for jazz. So those are some of the highlights. But living in a great city like New York, I'm like very serendipitous. I tell everybody, when I wake up, it feels like a big festival. And I've never lost that childlike quality in terms of enchantment, saying, okay, what's going to come or happen now? And, you know, the good and the bad, you know, that's what makes people a winner as opposed to a whiner. You figure out the solution and see what works.
Well, whenever I mention Bobbi Humphrey, people say, she's really good. Where is she playing? Now, do you play a lot of clubs now, or do you mainly do records? I
mainly do concerts. One of the great things that's coming up this summer I'm very excited about. I'm involved with a project with my friend Roy Ayers, and it's called the Superstars of Jazz Fusion, meaning that 25, 30 years ago we were doing the music that is now being called quote-unquote smooth jazz. So we're doing two things. We're actually educating people and correcting the history and protecting it for our progeny, and just making sure that people realize that this music that we were the innovators of, and we're taking the tour all over the world, Roscoe. I'm very excited. We kick off at the Capitol Jazz.
Who else is going with you?
It's going to be Roy Ayers, John Lucian, Gene Carn, Ronnie Laws, and who else? John Lucian and Wayne, I want to say Wayne Shorter, but we're going all over the world. Wayne Henderson.
Well, that is quite a group, and back in the 70s and 80s, that was where the action was.
Oh yeah,
Clearly.
we had Miles Davis doing Bitches Brew, Donald Byrd doing Blackbird, myself doing Blacks and Blues with the big single Harlem River Drive, Roy Ayers doing Everybody Loves the Sunshine, Run, Run, Run. Ronnie Laws doing Pressure Sensitive and the single Always There. So it's not only in terms of like doing the music and being on the road, but to actually, you know, sharing a history of being surrounded with these great people that I get a chance to call, you know, personal friends. It's a wonderful life to be able to make music and to have a great friendship.
Yeah, I've had an opportunity to meet all of them and to participate with them on TV shows and so on. They're really great people.
Great people.
Now, what about the audience for this? Who's your audience going to be when you do this concert series?
Our audience is primarily going to be older as well as younger people.
Older means over 40.
Meaning people over 40 who have been with us, who've gone through the ranks over the years, as well as a whole new generation who were kids and who are now young adults, and as well as, if you look at it now, it's hard to believe, but hip-hop is 30 years old now. And that direct lineage from jazz moving on to hip-hop, and that the people in hip-hop are the modern-day griots. They're telling the story, you know, and a lot of them have sampled Roy Ayers' music. I know Mary J. Blige sampled his music. Harlem River Drive, the bass line on that, on my song, is one of the most sampled bass line in hip-hop history. So we're bringing, it's always good when music is seen and used as a positive force of bringing, you know, generations and people together to have a great time. So to answer your question, it's a blended audience.
Everybody. Now, where are you going to? What are some of the venues for this tour?
We're going to kick off at the Capitol Jazz Fest in June the 3rd. That's
in Washington.
That's right outside Washington, in Columbia, Maryland. We're going to be in. Then we're going to be all over. We're going to be in Seattle. We're going to be in Kansas City. I believe we're going to do dates in Texas. We're going to Austria. We're going to Belgium. So wherever people want great music, we're going to be. But we're going to do most of the great festivals and performance arts centers around the country.
Now, in your album, Passion Flute, which is the one you were just talking about, what were you trying to say in that album?
I said, because I love words, and I wanted it to be clear, because as my career progressed, I got involved with doing a number of things, including writing poetry, essays, and even slogans. Part of my career has been involved in commercial TV in terms of doing jingles. But I wanted my core audience to know that whatever I did, that the flute would always remain my passion. And I was on a beach in Tobago. As you know, it's my favorite place. And I said, you know what? My favorite drink is passion fruit. And like a light of illumination, I'm like, there it is, passion flute. And today, that's been one of my biggest sellers, and it's on my label, Paradise Sounds Records. And I'm in the process of working on development of a couple of other CDs, because people are like, okay, Bobbi, Passion Flute has been out for a while. I'm like, you don't recognize a modern day classic? Hello? Well, sometimes if I'm very flippant,
now,
I'll
tell
just...
me, how difficult is it to be a jazz flautist? What are some of the skills and techniques that you need there that you don't need, let's say, on the trumpet or the saxophone?
Well, on the trumpet as well, you got to develop an embouchure. So in that sense, it's very similar, developing your tone. So when I first started in school, and I still do when I practice, developing long tones so that it's very fluid, very clear, different styles, the staccato. Sometimes, like if you're in a passage, you want to play something very, very fast. So your tonguing technique, double, triple tonguing, all of that. Learning your scales, harmonics and theory. And some people just have a natural ability, like the song Misty, the writer who did that and keyboardist, he was not trained in terms of doing that. So to answer your question,
that's the Earl Garner.
Earl Garner,
song,
right? So it's important to develop the musicianship, woodshedding. That's what my band director used to call it. You know, a lot of times, you know, you get on the road and you pick up, quote unquote, what I'm saying, you know, not necessarily bad habits, but you get away from the rudiment or the things that you've been taught because it comes so naturally and sometimes so easily. So sometimes you just have to buckle down and do your etudes and stuff.
I gather that there's much more technical training that's necessary to be a good jazz musician than it was before.
I would say, like Duke Ellington said, there's only two types of music, good and bad. And I think that the technical ability, whether the genre, it does not matter, whether it's, in my opinion, blues, jazz, pop, classical, what a player is saying and how he or she is saying it is determined. It's a direct correlation in his or her ability to get that across to the listener through his training, his or her training. So it's very, very important.
Well, what's the key to that? Instruction or practice or both?
If whatever works for the quote-unquote artist. In my opinion, as an artist, the most important thing is authenticity. I wrote particularly on my blog, I wrote that all art begins with truth. So it's what's in the artist. You take someone like a B.B. King, and you take a person who studied the guitar 10 or 12 years with a professor, and go on stage, and 9 times out of 10, my bet is going to be on B.B. King. He has a natural ability. So it's what works for the individual artist, and they inherently know what's working for them before they play it for anybody else, because nobody has to tell you you done good. You know whether you've done good
particularly when the
or not.
audience lets you know.
Yeah,
That's
and
true.
they will 9 times out of 10 let you know, but sometimes they might be kind and say, oh, that was a great performance, but in your heart you're like, you know, I think I could have done that passage better. So it's really the truth or the authenticity that starts and ends. Music is an inner stimulus.
Well, speaking of inner stimulus, the genre that's so popular now, hip-hop, how does that contrast with jazz? How does that influence jazz or jazz influence hip-hop?
I would say that they coexist because at any given time there's always different genres of music. Some are direct outgrowth. I would say the similarity is that in terms of improvisation in jazz, an individual player is playing and creating, you know, from the top of his or her head. In hip-hop, they have what they call the freestyling, and they have, you know, say like, particularly like years ago, they would call head-cutting sessions and the jam sessions, you know, player gets up.
Yeah.
Well, it's not unheard of to go into any hip-hop club and see different quote-unquote MCs or rappers getting up and off the top of their head coming up with all of these rhymes. And as I said, in my opinion, the hip-hop music, those individuals are modern-day storytellers. A lot of them are only relating to his or her environment. I love people who are not afraid of words. There might be some things or words that you or I or someone else does not agree with, but I would defend, you know, for the life of me, that person's right to say it, because it is free speech. And I think the artist should be allowed that certain truth. If you don't like it, don't buy the record or turn off the radio, or hold someone else accountable when in actuality, if there's any type of censorship, it should start with the parents, who should say, you know what, this video right here, I don't agree with this language, but I, as your parent, I'm the one who's raising you. This is a fantasy. It's no difference from going to see a John Wayne movie and they had the shootouts and they had the guns, but they did the commerce. But there has got to be parenting in the home as opposed to saying, okay, BET, MTV, I'm upset with you. No, it has to be the parent to say, this is fiction, this is fantasy, this is commercialization. This is what got green light, and this is the reason why it got green light. Because there's politics in everything.
Oh, clearly there is. But what about the beat in hip-hop? How is the beat in hip-hop different from the beat in jazz?
Well, it's not really that different. The imagination, the beat is endless. Jazz traditionally has been like usually a standard 4/4. In hip hop, there's like blends of all kinds of beats. For instance, my son, he's a producer now. There's a blending of like maybe over a 4/4 beat, and then they will blend in another album and what they call a mix. They will mix it. So rhythm is endless. So it's not really a difference, just as a jazz musician can come up with a blend. But traditionally, or I shouldn't say traditionally, most popular has been a 4/4.
Well, with the advent of electronic music, it seemed that there wasn't as much popularity among the traditional jazz artists who didn't use electronic music. How has electronic music affected jazz?
I say that there's a different sound. There's been a blending, particularly like the music, as I mentioned, of Roy Ayers and I, a blending of not only jazz, quote unquote jazz, but R&B elements, blues. But in my opinion, the word jazz has never been static. It defines definition. It's always moving. I remember distinctly a number of people getting, quote unquote, upset with Miles Davis when he moved into the electronica, so to speak, when he did On the Corner or Bitches Brew. But what I admired about Miles is that he always pushed the envelope as an artist, saying, you can agree with this music, you cannot agree with this music. More importantly, it's important that I'm truthful to myself, and this is what I'm feeling. I'm hearing this new sound of fusion. I feel like playing that. I've already shown you that I can play straight ahead, not that I have anything to prove. I'm answering to my calling as an artist, and this is what I'm playing today. You check me tomorrow, I might be back playing, straight ahead. But to answer your question, it has been a blending, but there's no definitive definition for jazz. 20, 30 years from now, there will be young people creating music, and they'll be calling it jazz. But jazz is just a creative art form, and it allows an openness of artistry.
Well, the key thing in jazz is improvisation.
Exactly. So with improvisation by itself just means very spontaneous, and the creativity is exponential. It really is.
Well, we've been talking about hip-hop, jazz, the flute, the business of jazz. Let's go back to the 19th and 20th century. And I'd like your opinion as to who were the most influential jazz musicians, composers in that period.
Oh my God.
That's a tall order, but just
well, my favorites,
it.
and in my opinion, one of the most prolific American composers, period, Duke Ellington, Billy Strayhorn. Also, another pivotal and important influence, in my opinion, John Coltrane, Ornette Coleman, who changed the face of harmonics or enharmonics. Those are my favorites.
What about the influence of Louis Armstrong?
Oh, but of course, Louis Armstrong, and also even prior to him, Buddy Bolden out of New Orleans, who really popularized and was highly responsible for the instrument being a solo instrument in terms of improvisation. So moving from ragtime and taking that on the road and coming on up to bebop, Dizzy Gillespie, then you go into cool jazz period, then you go into fusion. But to answer your question in terms of composers, still my favorite is Duke Ellington, Billy Strayhorn.
Well, Duke Ellington generally is recognized as the composer, American composer, classical or jazz of his time. And you had the opportunity to talk with him, to play with him. Huh?
Yeah, I was very, very blessed, And he, when we talk about jazz and we talk about classical music, there are many forms of classical music. Jazz is the African American classical music, whereas there's a European classical music, which is always, and really, in my opinion, misnomered as saying classical music. No, there are many classical musics. African, or actually jazz is the American classical music, period. So it is the highest art form of any type of medium of music, is a classic, which has stood the test of time.
How much do you think children today recognize the heritage of jazz, the African heritage, the Louis Armstrongs, the Duke Ellingtons, because they are focused on today and the hip-hop? How much do you think they really understand that background?
Well, I don't think that they understand it as much, and which, on a personal note, means to me that I, along with the other people who are here and who are adults at this particular time, that we are aware of that. One of my sayings I say on my blog, criticism without contribution is both countless and cruel. So if you're aware of something and you have the ability to do something about it, it's the adults. So it has to start with us in terms of demanding that music education and our history is perpetuated within the schools system, or we as adults, responsible adults, get together certain classes or groups of children and say, this, you know, as we did in the African villages, this is who this was, and this is why this note sounds like this.
And this is why Bobbi Humphrey is Bobbi Humphrey.
Exactly,
Not only
the tree.
Not only are you a great musician, you're a great educator, and today on African American Legends, we've been having a great conversation with jazz flautist Bobbi Humphrey.